No one expected this live TV moment. Ibrahim Traoré directly confronted Oprah Winfrey with a powerful truth that stopped her in her tracks. Her emotional, heartfelt response left the audience and viewers everywhere in tears. This unforgettable exchange is being called one of the most moving interviews of the year. It all started with a quiet phone call on a rainy Monday afternoon. Ibrahim Traoré, president of the transition of Burkina Faso, was wrapping up his day when his assistant handed him a phone. "Mr. President," she said softly, "it's Oprah Winfrey's team. They'd like you to appear on her show." He paused, surprised. He had heard of Oprah, who hadn't, but he wasn't one for television spectacles. "Why me?" he asked. "They said they've been watching your leadership and they want to talk about the man behind the title." After a long silence, he finally nodded. "Tell them I'll come." What no one expected, not Oprah, not Ibrahim, not the millions who would watch, was that this interview would become one of the most emotional moments in live television history. By Wednesday evening, Ibrahim was in Chicago, sitting in the green room of Oprah's studio. The lights outside were blinding, and the audience was already buzzing with excitement. Oprah herself walked in backstage, warm smile on her face. She said, extending a hand, "I've been looking forward to this." He stood, clasping her hand firmly, but gently. "And I," you replied. But beneath the smiles, there was tension. Oprah was known for asking hard questions that pierced through appearances. And Ibrahim, though calm, was not one to dodge uncomfortable truths. When the cameras rolled and they walked onto the stage, both wore the kind of polite smiles that hid something bigger brewing underneath. Nobody in that audience could have guessed how much those smiles would fade and how many tears would follow. Oprah started softly asking about his childhood, his rise to power, his hopes for Burkina Faso. Ibrahim answered humbly, his words measured, his voice even. But then Oprah leaned forward, her eyes sharp yet kind. "Mr. Traoré," she said, "you talk so much about hope. But isn't it true that your country is still one of the poorest on earth? That people still suffer under your watch? How do you reconcile that with your so-called leadership?" Gasps rippled through the audience. The air grew heavy. Ibrahim didn't flinch. He looked straight into her eyes, his own steady and unshaken. And then, very quietly, he said something. "No one expected, he began. "Poverty is not always what you think it is, and maybe it's time someone told you the truth." Oprah's breath caught. The audience fell silent. For the first time in her long career, Oprah Winfrey looked unsure, and what he said next would shake her and the world to tears. The audience was quiet now, almost afraid to breathe. Oprah stared at Ibrahim, her usual composure slightly cracked. By his steady gaze, she finally spoke again, this time her voice firmer. "Then tell me, Mr. Traoré," she said, "if poverty is not what we think it is, then what is it?" Ibrahim leaned back slightly, folded his hands on his lap, and took a breath. He began softly. "Poverty," he said, "is not just the absence of money or resources. It is the absence of dignity. It is when a mother feels invisible as her children starve. When a farmer prays for rain that never comes. When a child stops dreaming because no one ever told him he mattered." Oprah's lips parted slightly, caught off guard by the way his words seemed to pierce through the lights, through the cameras, straight into her own heart. "You see," he added, his voice calm, "what hurts people most is not empty pockets. It's feeling like the world has decided they are worth nothing." Oprah's eyes blinked quickly, as though fighting back something she didn't expect to feel, and the audience began to shift in their seats. The silence in the room stretched longer than any producer would have wanted, but no one dared to cut it. Oprah looked down for a moment, then back up, her eyes shimmering under the studio lights. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. She began, then stopped. Ibrahim didn't rush her. He simply watched her with a gentle, unjudging calm. Finally, Oprah found her words. "I've interviewed presidents, kings, billionaires," she said, her voice low, "but no one has ever said it like that. And no one has ever made me feel it like that." The audience gasped softly. Oprah's hand went to her chest, and a tear slid down her cheek. "I've spent my life telling stories," she whispered, "but I think maybe tonight I'm the one learning a story I never really understood." Ibrahim reached for the glass of water in front of him and took a slow sip. Then, still looking at her, he said only this: "It's never too late to see people again." At that, Oprah's head bowed and something in the studio shifted. It started with a sniffle. From somewhere near the front row, a woman dabbed at her eyes, then another. Then a man in the back let out a quiet sob. The weight of Ibrahim's words and Oprah's emotional reaction had cracked something wide open in the room. Even the camera operators, usually stoic, were blinking back tears. Oprah finally lifted her head, eyes red, but her smile returning, soft, almost childlike. "You have a gift," she said, voice thick with emotion. "You remind us what being human really means." Ibrahim shook his head gently. "No," he said. "I only remind people what they already know, but forgot how to say." At that, a ripple of applause began, tentative at first, then louder, then swelling, into a standing ovation. Oprah stood too, wiping her cheeks, and embraced him. For the first time in years, she didn't care about the cameras, the ratings, or the next segment. And as the applause echoed through the studio, millions watching it home felt something stir inside them, something they hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope, as the cameras rolled on. Oprah managed to regain some composure, though her voice still carried a noticeable tremble. She leaned forward and asked quietly, "If you could change just one thing about the world today, what would it be?" Ibrahim looked down at his hands for a long moment. The room held its breath. When he looked up, his eyes carried a weight that was almost too much to bear. "I would erase the feeling that some lives matter less than others." A hush fell over the studio. "You see," he continued, "we've built systems that measure worth by money, by skin, by the passport in your pocket. But a mother crying over her starving baby in Burkina Faso cries the same tears as one here. Yet the world looks away from her pain, as if she was born to suffer." Oprah swallowed hard, her eyes glistening again. He leaned in just slightly and whispered, "That is the greatest violence of all, to make someone believe they are invisible." The studio light seemed colder after that. By now, the energy in the room had changed completely. People who came in, expecting a typical interview, were now sitting on the edge of their seats, some clutching tissues, others just staring at Ibrahim in stunned silence. One woman in the audience sobbed openly. Another murmured under her breath, "He's right. My God, he's right." Oprah sat back for a moment, then looked at the camera. "I think everyone watching at home feels what we're feeling here," she said softly. Ibrahim gave a small, sad smile because deep down, he said, "We all know the truth. We just forget to feel it." Then he told a story about a child he met just days before leaving for America. A boy who clung to his leg and begged him not for money, but simply to tell the world they exist. He said to me, Ibrahim recalled, "Please, if you leave here, don't forget us." At that, several audience members broke down completely, and Oprah put her hand to her heart. "Ibrahim," she began, but she couldn't finish her sentence. Even before the camera stopped rolling, clips of the exchange were already spreading online. On Twitter, the hashtag #JogDon'tForgetUs was trending within minutes. Viewers across the world were posting their own stories of invisibility, of being ignored, of longing to matter. On YouTube, the live comments scrolled faster than anyone could read, most simply saying things like, "I'm crying, thank you for saying this," and "Why does this hurt so much?" Because it's true. Back in the studio, Oprah finally stood and took Ibrahim's hand. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice cracking. "But I promise I will not forget." Ibrahim stood too, and for the first time that night, he smiled warmly. "That," he said, "is all I could ever ask of anyone." The two embraced gently, and somewhere in the corner of the studio, a producer who had never cried on the job before wiped his eyes. Because in that one moment, everyone remembered what it meant to feel human again. As the cameras cut to commercial, the studio was dead quiet. Oprah sat still, her usual poise replaced with something raw and vulnerable. Ibrahim leaned forward slightly, his hands folded calmly. "You look like you carry the whole world," he said softly, almost a whisper. Oprah blinked at him. "I'm supposed to," she replied, forcing a small smile. Ibrahim tilted his head, his warm eyes holding hers. "But you weren't born to," he said gently. "You deserve to feel seen too." The words landed like stones in her chest. For the first time in years, she couldn't hold back the tears. The producer counted down for them to go live again, but the moment lingered in the air like a fragile glass about to crack. Oprah wiped her cheek and whispered back to him, How do you keep your heart open?" Ibrahim's reply was simple, but it would soon become the most replayed line of the entire interview. "You can't change what you won't let yourself feel." And when the cameras came back on, millions around the world would see a side of Oprah and themselves they didn't know existed. Oprah gathered herself and asked, "Where does this wisdom come from? Were you always this way?" Ibrahim's gaze softened. As he leaned back, "I wasn't born wise," he admitted. "I was born in dust." He shared the story of his mother, a woman who raised him in a tiny hut with a leaking roof and empty shelves. She used to tell him at night, "My son, we may have nothing in our hands, but don't let your heart become empty." He remembered one morning when he was 5, waking up to find his mother boiling stones in a pot to quiet his hunger because she had no food. "I asked her why she didn't cry," he said, his voice cracked for the first time. "She said, 'If I cry, who will teach you to hope?'" The entire studio was silent, some openly weeping now. Oprah put a hand over her mouth, visibly trembling, and Ibrahim added quietly, "I learned that pain can make you bitter or it can make you better, but you must choose." The audience was too moved to even clap. Outside the studio, the world was watching in real time. Clips of the interview went viral before it even finished airing. The hashtags #SirBetterNotBitter and Soaring, Don't Forget Us were trending worldwide. One viewer posted, "I've never cried watching an interview before. This man speaks for all of us who were made to feel invisible." Another wrote, "Ibrahim Traoré just changed my life with one sentence. God bless him." Back in the studio, eyes glistened as she said, "You've given a gift tonight, Ibrahim, to all of us." Ibrahim shook his head. "The gift," he replied, "is that you listened." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded photograph, his mother holding a young Ibrahim in her arms. He placed it gently on Oprah's table. "She'd want me to remind you," he said, "that no matter how much you carry, you're not alone." Oprah held the photo in her hands, tears falling freely now, and the audience erupted in the longest standing ovation of the night. As the audience slowly quieted after the standing ovation, Oprah reached under her chair, fumbling for something. When she looked up, her hands were shaking. "I wasn't going to share this," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ibrahim watched her calmly as she unfolded a single creased piece of paper. "It's a letter," she said, tears already in her eyes, from a girl in Chicago's South Side. "She wrote to me years ago saying she wanted to give up because she thought no one cared if she lived or not." Oprah swallowed, holding the letter up. "Tonight, Ibrahim, you just said everything I wish I'd said to her." Ibrahim leaned forward and gently took the letter in his hands. He read it silently for a moment, then looked up at Oprah. She's still here, he said with quiet certainty. Oprah gasped, covering her mouth. "Yes," he continued, "because when even one soul dares to see her, she can find the courage to stay." The entire room was silent but heavy with tears, and at that moment, a studio staffer slipped Oprah a note saying the young woman had tweeted, "I just watched this, and I'm still here. Thank you." The broadcast was supposed to end 5 minutes earlier, but no one dared to cut them off. The cameras kept rolling as Oprah whispered something to her producer. A phone rang on the desk. Oprah answered it on speaker. A young, timid voice came through. "Miss Winfrey, is this really live?" Oprah nodded at Ibrahim and answered softly, "Yes, sweetheart, you're live." The young woman sobbed into the line. I saw you and him, and I just wanted to say thank you. I thought nobody saw me." Ibrahim's eyes glistened, but his voice remained steady. "You are seen," he said firmly, "and you matter more than you will ever know." Even the camera operators wiped at their eyes as the girl whispered back, "You saved me." Oprah broke down then, covering her face as the girl hung up. Ibrahim stood resting his hand gently on Oprah's shoulder. "You've been saving lives all along," he told her. "Tonight just reminded you why." The studio erupted in a quiet, heartfelt applause, some standing. Once more, and Oprah, through her tears, managed to smile at Ibrahim. "You have the heart of a lion," she whispered. The interview wrapped up at last, but no one rushed out of the studio. People lingered in their seats, unwilling to leave the warmth of what they had just witnessed. As Oprah stood to hug him goodbye, she said, her voice, "I thought I was here to interview you, but you've taught me more in 1 hour than I've learned in years." Ibrahim smiled faintly. "Pain teaches us faster than privilege ever could," he replied, "but the heart still decides what we do with it." By now, Twitter was flooded with millions of posts. The hashtags Lionheart and I Am Seen trended at number 1. One viewer posted, "If every leader in the world spoke like Ibrahim Traoré, maybe we'd all remember we're human first." Another wrote, "I've never cried so hard watching TV. Bless this man, bless Oprah for letting it happen." Before he left the studio, Ibrahim turned to the cameras one last time. His voice was calm, yet heavy with meaning. "See the invisible? Hear the voiceless. Stand for the forgotten. That is where our humanity begins." The broadcast faded out, but the world was only just beginning to feel the ripple. The cameras cut, but the studio stayed hushed. Oprah sat back in her chair, staring into the distance as staff slowly packed up equipment. Ibrahim stood quietly at the edge of the set, hands clasped. He had not said another word after his final message on air. Finally, Oprah rose and walked over to him. Her makeup was stir from tears. She no longer tried to hide. "Why did you come here tonight? Really?" she asked him. Ibrahim smiled faintly, eyes deep with humility. "To remind people," he said simply, "that being seen is the greatest gift a human can give another. You see millions, Oprah, but who sees you?" Her lips trembled. He added, "Even those who seem the strongest are fighting to be heard. You taught the world to listen. Now let the world listen to you too." For a long time, Oprah just stood there, overcome, and then softly she whispered, "Thank you for seeing me tonight." They hugged. No cameras captured it, but millions felt it. The next morning, streets around the world buzzed, not with politics, but with humanity. Clips of Ibrahim's calm, powerful words filled timelines and phones. Cafes played the interview. On loop, even classrooms discussed what it meant to see the invisible. In Burkina Faso, thousands gathered in Ouagadougou holding signs that read, "We are seen and better, not bitter." Children wore homemade t-shirts with Ibrahim's face. Mothers wept in the streets, saying they'd never felt so proud of their leader. In Chicago, a group of high schoolers painted a mural of Oprah holding Ibrahim's mother's photograph. Below, they scrolled, "Hope is a choice." At home, Oprah sat in her quiet living room, watching replay after replay of the interview. Each time she heard his words, "See the invisible, hear the voiceless," she felt her chest tighten. She sent him a private message that simply said, "You changed more lives in 1 hour than most of us do in a lifetime. You changed mine." And in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim read it and smiled. By the end of the week, over 120 million people had watched the interview. Headlines called it the most moving moment of the year. But for Ibrahim, it wasn't about headlines, it was about hearts. He stood at a small village school that Friday afternoon watching children play soccer barefoot in the dust. A little girl ran up to him. "Shilly, sir," she asked softly. "Why did you make Oprah cry?" He crouched to her level, smiling. Because he said, "Sometimes tears are how hope finds its way back into the heart." The girl grinned and ran back to her friends, and Ibrahim stood there quietly looking at the sky, feeling at peace. That night, Oprah signed off her show with a final thought. "We all carry unseen battles, but every now and then, someone reminds us that we are still human and still worthy of love. Thank you, Ibrahim, for reminding me." And viewers everywhere wept as they watched, feeling lighter, feeling seen.